What better time than now to dive into my best guess on what reality actually is? I always look, the camera's over here where I'm looking right now, but then I'm recording from my phone, so I always look at my face. Anyway, what better time than now to. That's why sometimes I have eye contact, sometimes I don't. It's just some. Anyway, it's irrelevant. Um, what is reality? So, quite a deep question. My best guess is that reality is kind of like a game that we have created. I think that at the absolute core of reality, it is consciousness that is the anomaly of existence. If it were matter that is the anomaly of existence, it doesn't really work as well as if it were consciousness. Obviously, before I could dive any deeper, we can't know if anybody claims with absolute certainty that they have a monopoly on the truth, or that they think that theirs is the absolute truth and there is no and ifs or buts. You should be very skeptical of that individual. This is just my best guess after deep study across various religions, new and old, and occult, and that type of energy, all things metaphysical, quantum physics, the science aspect of it also. There are only two real truths that we know, and the first one is I think, therefore I am, meaning that you think, you know that you exist. Whoever is watching it, you exist for sure because you can feel it. It is self-evident. You look around, you can feel your existence, you think you are existing. Even if somehow it's just and there is no free will or something like that, you still exist and you're still here. So your existence is 100% self-evident. There is also another truth, that is which something is upholding all of reality, whether you believe it to be laws of nature or whether you believe it to be a conscious entity. That's whatever, but the truth is that something is upholding reality. So then you come to the next foundation of reality, and you're like, okay, so from what does all of existence stem then? And it's like you either have two parts, right? It's either consciousness is the fundamental truth, and condiment of consciousness is the anomaly of existence. Consciousness is something that just is, and it can't be explained, and it probably will never be explained, and we'll probably never figure out why consciousness exists at all. It's a very strange thing for just consciousness to exist at all. Yeah. But then the other side is, okay, well then there's just the material aspect, and from the material aspect, consciousness somehow grows. But it doesn't really make as much sense as if consciousness was the anomaly, because even if material somehow spawned in out of nowhere and the Big Bang was just an anomaly where material, boom, just comes out of nowhere, the problem of consciousness still isn't solved, because it's just like, how do you get an inert force, an inert material, chemicals, and then solids, how does that turn into consciousness? We haven't figured that out yet. So it seems to me that it would make more sense if consciousness was the foundation of reality. It's obviously not verifiable. It's just a theory of mine amongst, and it's repeated a lot in Eastern religions and also in New Age religions. Not so much in the Abrahamic faiths, but they do also point towards that too, that consciousness is the fundamental, because, God said, let there be light and all that. So actually, yeah, even the Abrahamic ones, they don't speak on it like directly, but they are asserting it. So all things spiritual kind of point towards consciousness being the anomaly, but it's just science that is a little bit behind. That's just like stuck in this very materialistic view. And not all science, when you go into metaphysics, they're a bit more on the consciousness is fundamental wave, a lot of them. But yeah, the materialist side of science, they seem to like this materialist view. But yeah, consciousness can't be solved. So anyway, I'm just yapping on this point. I lean towards consciousness being the anomaly, but I obviously can't know, and none of us can truly know. Maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe we'll prove it at one stage, or maybe we'll prove that it's material and I'll be wrong. But right now, I lean towards consciousness being the fundamental of all of existence. And from that, I believe that consciousness exists, and it exists eternally. So you think it would start as like an awareness, and then it would be like moving into a conscious being. And then once you have that, you would be like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm just consciousness existing. And, eventually you'd probably get a little bit bored, or you'd probably want a little bit more variety than just existing. I mean, it wouldn't be necessarily bad, but it wouldn't necessarily be good either. You'd probably just get a bit bored sitting there, or not even sitting, floating there in an eternal void, I guess. And from that, everything would be created. And then first you'd create, surely, a perfect utopia type energy where everything is beautiful, harmonious, lovely, and fill it with other conscious beings. Split your consciousness off and have them inhabit this land. Split your consciousness off, or either create new consciousness. Not entirely sure how that one works, but it's one of the two, surely. And then eventually you'll come into the problem of free will. And then with the problem of free will, people will want to go and do whatever is possible, and whatever you can think of must exist, because you can think of it, and if consciousness is fundamental, then it exists within the conscious field. So eventually you'll have your individual consciousness that is split off from the whole consciousness, and all want to experience more. So you have these vast heavenly realms where there's just so much to explore, so much to do. But still, there won't be everything that you can do, because if you want to experience some form of suffering, or some form of pain, or some form of bringing pain to others, or if you want to have the opportunity to, give pain back and forth to another individual, that wouldn't be allowed in these higher planes of existence, because it would dilute the whole plane of existence, and it would bring the entire vibration down, and it wouldn't be so much of a utopia anymore. So then you would create more of the material realms, which is the realms that we inhabit right now. And, everything basically goes here. We just have more constraints. So there's more constraints with the laws of physics, but then morality is a little bit more blurred for us. It's like we have the capability to do whatever we want down here. We could do great evil, or we could do great good. This is where free will roams completely. So yeah, that's what we've got. And then, so in the heavenly realms, there'd be just a huge variety of things that could be done. Everything that you could imagine, every type of utopia that you could imagine in your mind would have to exist, because it exists within the field of consciousness. And likewise, everything negative and evil and dark that you can think of also has to exist within the field of consciousness. And because of free will, and it's like, if free will exists, which I do believe it does, you have to allow everything to be explored. And unfortunately, that means everything dark that can happen does happen somewhere within existence. And that is how I believe reality would be structured. So it's just one big game that we're kind of playing, but ultimately we're all the one consciousness. And I believe that you, as your soul, will have, depending on how you live your life out here, will have more opportunities or options later on to explore, or evolve or move into different realms. So let's just say you were a very evil person and you were did bad decisions. You probably wouldn't be able to go back to the heavenly realms after that life. You would probably have to go through a couple more purifying lives, because if your consciousness is diluted and down to that state of existence, sending you back into a heavenly realm would impact its purity. So you would probably have to go through the material realms again and again and again until you purify yourself a little bit more. And then you'd have access to the heavenly realms. And, the heavenly realms would be a bit more joyous, a bit more full. You'd be a bit more fulfilled. But here it's kind of like a training ground, but you also have the free will to do whatever you want. So there's that. Yeah, and that's all we've got. So in the material realms, it can obviously get really bad here. Chaotic, beyond chaotic. I don't think any of us have really seen, well, maybe some of us out there, some humans have really seen how bad it can get. But it can get really bad, but we haven't seen it on a planetary scale of how bad it can actually get, or as on a species scale. Like we could really go down into the chaos. And that's a possibility while you're here in the material realms, for sure. So yeah, that's why I always say you should always work on yourself, work on becoming more virtuous, stay authentic, have integrity, have honor, and help out your fellow being, because if you don't, you could definitely be stuck down here in the material realms, and it's not bad. You can make use of it. You can do okay with it, but it is a bit of a survival mode, right? So if you don't want to be constantly in survival mode, if you want to have a little bit of a break or a little bit of a holiday within existence, because I do believe that we will never stop existing, you should probably purify yourself and purify your being so that you can access heavenly realms. And even if I am wrong in my theory, my analysis of existence, well, guess what? You still lived a wonderful life. You still impacted people's lives greatly, and you still did a wonderful thing. So it's a win-win, really. Even if I'm wrong, it's a win-win. But yeah, that's my theory of existence. And then also, if you really want to, I do believe that you can merge back into God. If you really desire that, you can merge back into that state of being. And I think you could merge back into the state of being where it's just like the void and there's just nothing to experience. I'm sure you could experience that if you truly wanted. We can access that a little bit in deep meditation just here on Earth. So I'm sure it's possible to do it in a God state of mind. Or you could just literally become God and interact with all your individual consciousnesses that are split from feeling like they are God in the moment. So yeah, it's a bit of fun that we have here in existence. I think that consciousness is the anomaly, and we're just here, and we're just making the most of it, and we're going to be here forever, and we can't ever stop it, so we might as well enjoy it. That is my complete theory on what reality is. If I am wrong, I am happy to be proven wrong. Don't know how you'll do it, but I've come to this conclusion after deep studying and cross-referencing across religions, New Age religions, and quantum physics, and little more dashes of science here and there, and people's experiences with out-of-body experiences, and metaphysical beings communicating through humans and stuff like that. Different authors writing various books about how they communicated with higher spirits. That's my view. That's how I believe it is. There's obviously probably a little bit more here and there in between. Like there's heavenly realms within the material realms, and there's like you can have like a heavenly type realm where it's like you're still material and you still will die, but in the spiritual heavenly realms you will live forever. You can't ever die. But yeah, there's probably a little bit more that I missed out, but that's the overarching general theory of everything, that consciousness is fundamental and we are just here making the most of it, really. And I would recommend, moving more towards those heavenly realms. Will be feeling a little bit nicer, but you're also here because you probably decided to come here because you probably wanted to explore free will a little bit. So there's no real rush. You have eternity. Make the most of it and enjoy yourselves and do well, do good, and move towards higher states of being. I think that's the best that we can strive for.